What's so great about this property is the different environments that you go through. Similar to a lot of the great golf courses, you traverse, multiple environments throughout your experience. And, before the dunes were here, of course, you get the big views and obviously the ocean. But beyond that, like, it didn't feel like as dramatic of an environmental change as you could have. You got a little piece of it on 9, and then you're like, where are all the dunes? The dunes all disappeared. Like, that's disappointing, And so we really wanted to kind of bring that element back, and obviously it checked a bunch of boxes off for the success of the project. It creates a really, really dramatic and memorable, experience on this part of the golf course.
And most importantly, the dune shelter now has dunes around it.
It does. There were no dunes here.
It's worthy of the name.
Can you take me back to the beginning of the MPCC Dunes redesign project from your perspective, just from the beginning of your involvement with the club?
Yeah, for sure. It was an extremely organic foot in the door for us here at MPCC. Dave and I had the opportunity to come play the Dunes course. This is probably 2014. When we played the course, we played with Dave's father and a good friend of ours who was a superintendent at the preserve at San Lucie at the time. When we finished, Corey, let us know that, Mr. Zoller, Bob, wanted us to let him know what we thought of the golf course.
We were asked by Bob Zoller, the longtime superintendent out here, kind of what our thoughts were, knowing who we were and what we did for a profession. We had some opinions and thoughts, and the 14th hole where we are right now is actually really the impetus of how it even became a project, really. We were having a conversation with a member here, and he was asking us, what we thought of this golf hole, and isn't it the best par 3 in golf and all this, and we're like, it's one of the best settings for golf, but what man created on there is like, it's not as good as we saw it, right? That conversation went on for way too long, too many words were said, and I just said, listen, I'll draw what we think it can be, and there you go. And drew that little sketch on the plane ride home. Again, knowing nothing about a potential project. This was just solving an argument that we were having with somebody. And that sketch ended up getting on the boardroom table like a few days later, and then the phone rang, and that kind of started the conversations.
There was a very comprehensive book that was put together to provide to the membership to help explain, why we all felt that they had something much better here than the course that they were playing at the time. When Mike Strantz did the shore course, he did I think a full set of watercolors of the golf. He also expressed his design ideas in that manner to the club as far as what he wanted to see. And, Mike was an artist who happened to be a golf course architect. I mean, we're both huge fans of Mike Strantz, and just to be associated with this club and certainly this, this facility and Mike it's awesome.
So Tim, take me through the process of planning the ideas for the redesign. What were the concepts that you were considering, and how did you eventually settle on the plan that you came up with?
It was a very difficult golf course, and part of what drove the club to want to remodel the Dunes course partially was water usage. This is the most expensive water for golf maybe anywhere in the world. And so they wanted to use less of it and have a design that could support that. But 70% of the play had matriculated to the shore course because it was a much more enjoyable experience for the membership. And what Mike Strantz did there is just, just incredible. So when we looked at the Dunes course, we wanted to create something that fit the land much better than what the existing design did, from our opinion. It was very formulaic. There was a lot of geometry within that design, and I mean geometry from an aesthetic standpoint, and really formulaic as far as the repetition of the golf holes and how they were presented. When we stood on number 4 for the first time, it was a squarish green with 4 equally spaced bunkers, 2 on each side, and just the geometry was reinforced.
David, tell me about what you did at the 4th hole and what the results were of that redesign there.
Yeah, the 4th hole was one of the first places that Tim and I stood behind the back tee and just had a very similar vision without even talking to each other. The golf hole was not interacting with its environment at all. It was just a plug of dirt kind of just sitting in the middle of this big valley that had no relationship with its surroundings. And there was a really cool fronting ridge short of the green that came out from right to left out of the woods. And it just set itself up for an awesome green that just kind of started just short of that and warped around it. I mean, nature was telling us what that hole wanted to be from our eyes. And so we kind of lowered the green in to create that backstop kick slope on the left, created kind of a duney bunker in that ridge that was coming out of the forest. And we really just got really aggressive with stretching that green as far back right around the horn as we could, to the point where a back right pin, some people say it's a dog leg par 3, but the ground contours allow you to feed it in there, so you don't have to take a direct line, it's super fun. There was an awesome opportunity to make it even longer, and we don't necessarily look for length's sake, but in this instance, with the downhill nature of the golf hole and what we saw as a future kind of rambling, running away from you green, we thought it would be awesome if you were actually hitting a little bit longer club, lower loft that had that run to it. It's a really, really fun hole, and in combination with pulling 5 tees down the slope closer to 4, making it more walkable, better connection, it just kind of married that whole scene together, and it's a really special part of the property.
We knew that we wanted for probably to be one of the largest greens on the course in the hole that we saw. And our initial thought process is we're going to follow it by the smallest green on the course on number 5. And that didn't end up being the case. And again, how the design evolves with time. When we shaped in the 5th green complex, and it is a reachable, par 4 for a good portion of the membership, we got the math right, we got the yardage right. We couldn't see the target because it sat up on top of this hill. And for us, it really took away the opportunity, the visualization of what am I supposed to do here? What am I trying to achieve? And so it didn't end up being the largest green followed by the smallest green, but it ended up being 2 golf holes that really play as half pars. Back to back, one being a long 3, one being a short 4. Was such a great way to turn that corner that Dave mentioned, and before you head back to the ocean. So those were probably 2 of the biggest deviations, I think, from what the old design was as far as where the features sat.
So here we are, 5th hole at the Dunes course. We've just played a difficult, long, downhill par 3. You follow that up with a short par 4 going up the hill. Nice little contrast to the hole before, both in terms of, length relative to par, uphill versus downhill. So could you talk me through the strategy of this hole? What are we going to do here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. 4 and 5, they're really conjoined from a design standpoint. What we did on 4, where we positioned the green, allowed us to bring 5 tees off the hill. They used to be up there, and your only play was about a 40-yard fade off the tee. There were a lot of trees, and there was a hill that was kind of in the way that's not there anymore. And we wanted to bring the tees down. One, we wanted the connection to number 4 green. But here on 5, it's a reachable, very, very reachable par 4, but it doesn't mean you should try, depending on where the hole location is. Today with the pin back right, it's the classic pins back right, play as far left as you can to get the best angle. It's not just angle. The back part of this green we actually tipped away, so it actually drains out the back of the green. The further right you play, the more your ball lands on a descending grade. The further left you play, your ball lands on a side slope, and you actually have a much better opportunity of being able to hold the shot playing into the side slope as opposed to the descending grade. I mean, there's a lot of heroic strategy in golf, and there's a lot of subtle strategy in golf as well. When you can combine both on the same golf hole, it's usually pretty interesting.
So there was a second sketch, this one of what ultimately became the 10th hole. Right. What was that sketch?
It was just the design detail that we saw. Honestly, it was another incredible setting, just staring out panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean. We had another vision there, expanding the dunes around it and just kind of giving the artistic detail that we, like to bring to golf holes. Honestly, making something that was aesthetically pleasing to stop somebody in their track, just so you can start the conversation really more than anything. And then once those big pieces were really settling and things were feeling good from a group standpoint, we did more perspective sketches. All right, now what is that scene gonna look like? What is this scene gonna look like?
It's an interesting property in the sense that you have some really spectacular land, and then you have a couple of awkward and tight parts of the property. And you need to make those parts of the property feel like they're part of the same golf course.
Yeah, the first 3 holes, you start up at this awesome high point at the clubhouse or looking out at the ocean, and you kind of just head into the forest with 1 through 3. And then 4, you kind of start turning a corner, and 5, you head back, but you sense a change coming. It's the first part of the property that we started sprinkling in a little bit of the dunescape just to kind of wet the whistle of the golfer, to give him a little taste of what was to come a few holes later. 6 rises up and crests over, kind of in that similar forest that hole 3 is. And then 7 is the first time when you're looking past 7 green, the par 3, down 8, you get a really small, distant glimpse of the ocean, and you just kind of, you feel the weather changing, you feel the wind blowing, and the anticipation builds as now 7, 8, 9, you're just making a beeline towards the ocean. And you pop out like mid hole 9 with kind of a grander view of that ocean. And then climb up the hill onto 10T, and you get kind of one of the more dramatic views because you're at a very high point there. And then 11 through the 16 through the dunes, and then 17 and 18 kind of head back uphill into the forest and back to this high point. And you explore 2 to 3 really drastic environmental changes, which is, it's a special, special place.
So Tim, could you tell me about, if you were to stand in this same place, what was here before?
Yeah, a lot less sand. Every project we do, we always want to improve the design characteristics. I mean, that's essentially why we're doing the work, especially on a remodel. But there's also functional components a lot of times that we have to try to account for. You know, part of reducing the amount of turf grass that they had, we had to replace it with something. And the dune that you see behind us here, number 10 tees, that plays on the left-hand side of number 11 as well, that was existing. That was the only dune that you see that's on MPCC property that was here. Everything else that you see moving across the golf hole 11 and 12 behind the green, this was all created. And our shaper, Jose Vivo, was lowering the original 9th green. He took 2 feet of clay off and he said, guys, I'm sitting on pure sand. And we mined about 5,000 cubic yards of sand out from underneath the old 9th green, and that's what came in to create the dunes that you see today that help frame these golf holes in.
So the only thing that was existing is this large landform out to our right. The dunes actually just prior to 17 Mile Drive in front of the cars. That's where 11T complex sits in. Those dunes were existing. These dunes that migrated up into 10Ts to a point existed. But everything in between 11 and 12, left of 12 alongside the road, everything around the back of 11 green. And of course, then you hop over everything on 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 Ts, that was all created. And so I don't know the total amount of acres of dunescape that we created, but it was significant. So our role was really, you know, where do they want to be from a golf standpoint, from a framing standpoint, from that visual, from the believability of everything, play space, and then get the heights and elevations that we want, right? And then we essentially turn it over to the landscape architect to, you know, make sure he's picking the appropriate native species that are going to grow and throw down roots and stabilize, because this sand moves a lot, obviously. And so, you know, it was really that collective team effort to make them believable. And, you know, when we stand here today, seeing 10 plus years of growth on these, it's really hard to distinguish which ones were here and which ones aren't. Obviously, day one, they were easier identifiable because they were very sparse and just more sand. But it's really cool to see how they filled in over the years.
And they take relatively quickly. Like, we were shocked how quickly the dunes established and naturalized. We thought it would take years. It was probably less than 18 months before we actually had to start thinning the dunes back out from a playability standpoint. So in this environment with the right material, it wants to grow here, and it wants to grow in the sand, so nature does its thing.
16th hole at MPCC Dunes. This is an interesting short par 4. David, could you just take me through the basic design of the hole? What are the thoughts about strategy here and how you went about constructing this hole?
Right. Yeah, you're right about it. It's a very short par 4. It's not drivable necessarily, but it's still a 2-shotter. But you kind of have to pick your line, how aggressive you want to be off the tee. You can play real safe to the fat part of the fairway up here that's a little higher elevation. Leaves you more kind of a drop shot into this green that's really wide and rambling with a lot of aerial hole locations, but also a lot of ground play you can utilize as well. The longer hitters do have the ability to cut this corner and get down closer to the green into this neck. Obviously, there's a lot more risk involved with that play. The backdrop of this is just off the charts, right? I mean, you're just staring wide panoramic view of the Pacific Ocean. You got some of the dunes course behind us. Like I said, it's very panoramic, it's very wide. And so we felt like the setting called for a very wide panoramic green to sit in here. It really complemented the scene nicely. And that kind of led us down that path of, detailing out those big kind of design decisions.
What are some of the options that this green shape and contouring creates?
Vastly different options based on your ability to see different shots or your ability to hit different shots, right? If the pin is on the right-hand side, you really got to come in a little bit more aerial. You can run it in, but you risk the chance of it catching that little inside suction move and peeling down to kind of where you see the pin today on the left. The left pin where it is today, or even further left, you can go aerial to it, or you can hit a low running draw that catches that suction move, and it'll just keep funneling all the way back there, which is super fun. Tim says it best. I mean, whenever you can see your ball slowly rolling closer to the hole, that's a really exciting thing for golfers.
We were very cognizant of the fact that this was going to be the last shot that you played at the Pacific Ocean. And we knew that we wanted to make it memorable. And as Dave mentioned, this was this green and number 4 green, I think were the first 2 greens that we stood here and we stood, we know what we want to do here. And it was relatively quickly, we know what we want to do here. And many times when we design, once we lock in greens that we feel we want to build for a particular reason and where they are in the round, a lot of the other green designs then revolve around those to make sure that we have variety and we have, we would say consistently inconsistent within the greens as best we can be.
David, which hole are you proudest of out here when you look back on the full project?
I think working on 17 and 18, I think we're pretty proud of. I'm pretty proud of. It's hard coming from being out on the coast through the dunes, and then the last 2 holes turn inland through the houses, and it's has a really good opportunity to be a letdown.
We didn't move a lot of dirt on this project. We didn't need to. I would say 80% of the dirt that we moved was on the 17th hole, and that was to cut the hole in the ground and get it underneath the homes as much as we could. That's the only thing we could do.
And so we focused a lot of energy to making sure those 2 holes were as strong as they can be and as memorable as they could be. So I think that was a tough challenge that I hope we succeeded on. 14's awesome, we're proud of it, but I mean, it's, that's kind of, I wouldn't say it was easier, but it had a really good starting point.
Now, David, could you tell me about the history of this golf hole and then what you guys did to it when you redesigned the course?
Yeah, so originally the green was a lot further away from the coastline and, not really truly understanding why, but in subsequent renovations before us, the green kept slowly inching closer and closer to the coastline, which is great. And we saw an opportunity to get it even more close. And obviously the conditions and the wave action and the tides, it has the potential to flood. And we were, I guess, pushy enough to get that green close, knowing that it might have the occasional flooding every couple years, and club thought that was well worth the minimal risk to put it in such a dramatic location. So that was really like the big puzzle piece move that we did initially, and then obviously the detail all wrapped around that to make it kind of fit with the new theme of the course.
Something that's special about the design of the hole is this horizon line of the green, right? You really did achieve kind of an infinity edge there. It really does seem like it's kind of floating out over the ocean.
It was very intentional, absolutely, yeah. No, we built the green up a little bit from the grade that was there, obviously, hopefully to get it a little bit higher than the normal high tides and floods that would potentially come in to protect the green, but at the same time, that was absolutely the design thought, is we wanted to have that infinity edge so you stood here and you saw nothing but the edge of the green and then the Pacific Ocean in the backdrop.
It's funny looking back. I made a trip out here in college, probably 2000. And just a couple years ago, I'm looking through pictures of that trip, reminiscing, and I took a picture of this golf hole from right there as a tourist. And it's just so serendipitous, how life comes around like that. It was really, really cool to see. But it's special for them because, I've been on that side of the equation. It's a really cool place to see. And I mean, we're tickled and very fortunate that we were able to, impart our so-called expertise onto such a special piece of ground.